Oh my god. What did you do? What did you do? The ceremony is about to begin. This one's directed by Sean Nicholas Lynch and it's a found footage mockumentary style film. And it follows a YouTuber documentarian who has decided to do a documentary on this cult, for lack of a better word, that exists in California near Mount Shasta. And they are all about the kind of the Egyptian lifestyle, the kind of the ancient Egyptian lifestyle. They all kind of go by different names like Set and Osiris and things like this, and they kind of live their life kind of like a hippie commune, but basically like worshipping ancient Egyptian practices ultimately. And our documentarian thinks his ex-girlfriend might have got involved in this cult. So he decides to go and investigate, and when he gets there, there's only one guy there, this guy called Anubis, who is the leader, but he is the sort of the second generation leader and has driven some people away with more sort of sinister ideas and stuff. So, you know, this Anubis sort of tends to seem quite, you know, fulfilling in regards to helping this documentarian Keith to answer any questions and show him around the complex. But as the film goes on, we learn a dark secret. What'll happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's talk about it. So this is going to be a film, obviously made for found footage film fans. There's not a lot of horror in this, let me just get that out of the way straight away, but it does have lots of setup. If that sounds interesting, then this is right up your street. This is a very California style movie, is the best way I would describe it. Our two key players seem very much from California, with Californian sort of attitudes. The setup though is interesting, this kind of cult, and we see interviews with ex-cult members who kind of got out before this Anubis sort of took over, and they tell of the previous kind of leader, Osiris, and how he was like a man of peace and etc., and how everyone was kind of like, I mean, it does sound very hippie and all that sort of stuff, new age and everything, but they were all like happy enough, and then this guy took over and he's been a bit more difficult. But I think the setup sort of sounds interesting enough, and the way these kind of interviews are conducted, I think, seems sort of genuine. You almost feel like you're watching an actual sort of documentary initially, I have to say. And then they've obviously found this location. I mean, never been to California, so I don't know the area, but there's obviously some place which has been set up to look like a Egyptian themed area, buildings and stuff. And I suspect this movie was written around this location. They've obviously found this location and thought, right, let's write a movie around it. But yeah, there is this location, and there's all these buildings that are all like painted and stuff to kind of like mimic ancient Egypt and stuff. And these apparent followers used to kind of live this life and everything. But yeah, the location, I've got to say, for if you were to just believe this movie, okay, that's a pretty good location. There's obviously clearly actual sort of buildings in here that look like they're made to be a modern representation of ancient Egypt and stuff. So, that looks pretty cool. And then as the film enters its third act, we do get some horror action. I mean, very light horror action, but there is a supernatural element, possibly, that kind of comes up. And if you're familiar with what supernatural elements tend to be to do with Egyptian culture. It doesn't take a genius to figure that out. But yeah, it almost comes like a full-on sort of zombie attack towards the end of the movie. So, you know, it has some interesting things in the film. I think again, if you look at it from the point of view of the lens of someone from California, I guess these people seem very much from that area and act like it. So I suppose the acting is reasonable. Let me just say that. Let's talk about what doesn't work. Okay, it's a lot of nothing in this movie. If you are watching this as a horror film, there's like no horror at all in the first 2 acts. And this is not a long film. It's just these 2 guys talking. And that's basically it. It's 2 guys talking in a room. And both of them seem, I have to be honest with you, a little eccentric. Even our protagonist, who is, you know, meant to be the normal guy. Like, he's this guy, and we see at the beginning of the film, he kind of gives his motivation for doing this. And apparently, he had an ex-girlfriend years ago who dumped him. And then since then, he's like got married and stuff. And then all of a sudden, this girlfriend, this ex-girlfriend has messaged him out of the blue and, you know, basically said she's kind of got involved in this sect. And then this guy's like, he wants to go and find her. He's like, well, aren't you married? I mean, like, who cares what an ex-girlfriend is doing from years ago? Like, who cares? I mean, like, there's one email. The guy even says she sent him one email and then he replied and it was like the email didn't exist. So he's made this whole documentary to try and follow up an ex-girlfriend from years ago when he's now married. And it's just like, come on. I mean, like, Jesus Christ. And then later on he said he's getting divorced. And then later on still he says he is divorced. So the kind of like the story changes through the movie. And I thought, well, if you're divorced, I'm not surprised when you're kind of acting like this, if we're being honest. And he's supposed to be the straight guy, you know, and then we get this Anubis, who's going to be this, like, this new leader of this sort of sect. And yeah, he's kind of all wacky, but at least he's like meant to be like this eccentric sort of character. But all he wants to do is kind of like drink and stuff. You know, and he apparently used to run some porn site and stuff, so that, you know, it's like, it's just these two sort of, these characters talking for much of the film. Ultimately, it ain't particularly interesting. And I have to say, unless you are very much of the California mindset, I think this sort of, the attitudes might be, you know, a little bit too bohemian for some. Let me just say that. Let's talk about the actual horror elements. So we get this kind of horror sequence towards the end of the movie. And, you know, we have our protagonist, Keith, kind of stumbling around in the dark, looking for stuff, and he finds sort of mummified bodies which seem to come to life. But my first thought were, are they actually mummies, or are these people that have just been sort of wounded or something, or experimented on? Because they don't really appear particularly supernatural. I mean, they've got like modern bandages on and things, and like blood is coming out, which would mean there's blood flow. And it's just like, so my first thought was they're not supernatural. These are just like people. These are the worshippers that this Anubis guy has been like doing stuff to. But it's never really clear about if they're actually sort of supernatural or they're just people who have been messed up on drugs and then some sort of weird procedures and stuff. It's not clear, and as such, I mean, like the dialogue seems to suggest that they're actual mummies, but my first reaction is like these are people that have just been like locked up for some reason. So it's really not that exciting, I have to say, in regard to that horror finale. And this our main guy, Keith, you know, he just seems an idiot. Not only just about the whole like marriage and looking for an ex-girlfriend, but the decision to make, the fact that he's like told no one where he's going, he doesn't need to communicate with people. He even says that he's 300 yards from the freeway, but there's like one guy that's there to stop him. It's just silly. It's just not very good. So this movie, I think, has an interesting concept. And I think the location certainly, you know, I can understand why they wanted to take advantage of it, but the movie around it is just like weak sauce. 3 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.